Zero recoil doesn't exist. Every gun that sends a bullet forward shoves back into your hand. That's physics, and no marketing department has ever repealed it. But spend an afternoon on a range with the right handguns and you'll understand why people keep using the phrase anyway, because there are carry guns out there that recoil so softly your brain files it under nothing happened. No wrist snap, no flinch building up round after round. The sights barely leave the target. And here's why that matters more than almost anything else on a spec sheet. A gun that hurts to shoot is a gun you don't practice with. It sits in a drawer. You tell yourself you'll get to the range next month and you don't. And the one skill that actually keeps you alive quietly rots. Soft shooting isn't a comfort feature. It's the difference between owning a gun and being able to use one. So I pulled 5 carry pistols that get closer to that than almost anything on the market. And not one of them is the gun everybody recommends. A couple come from companies most American shooters walk right past. One of them is a design that's been quietly perfect at this for years while the internet argued about something else entirely. And the one at number 1 uses a mechanism almost nobody else on the market bothers with, which is exactly why it shoots the way it does. Starting at number 5 is the Steyr C9A2MF, and it doesn't have a single moving part dedicated to recoil. What it has is a shape. Here's the idea. Think about where the barrel sits relative to your hand. When the gun fires, the recoil pushes straight back along the bore. If that bore line sits high above your grip, that push isn't just moving backward, it's rotating you. Your hand becomes the hinge and the barrel becomes the lever. And the longer that lever is, the harder the muzzle flips up. Drop the bore down closer to the web of your hand and you shorten the lever. Less rotation, less flip. Same energy delivered in a straighter line into your forearm instead of into a pivot. Steyr has been chasing that geometry since the 90s, and the A2MF is built around a high grip angle and a low bore axis specifically for recoil mitigation. In practice, that means a 9mm that stays noticeably flatter than the height and weight would suggest. The numbers on the compact model, 3.8-inch barrel, 17 rounds in the magazine, 5.6 inches tall, 1.3 inches wide, and right around 27 ounces empty. It ships with a flared magwell and interchangeable grip panels, and street prices have been landing in the mid-500s. Now the honest part. This is not a pocket pistol, and I'm not going to pretend it is. At 27 ounces and 5.6 inches tall, it's in Glock 19 territory. You can carry it, plenty of people do, but you're carrying it on a belt with a real holster and a cover garment. The trapezoid sights are polarizing, and I'll be blunt, some people never adapt to them. And because almost nobody in America bought one, the holster and aftermarket support is thin compared to anything mainstream. That's the trade. You're getting genuinely excellent recoil geometry from a company most of your range buddies couldn't pick out of a lineup. Which brings us to a gun that took the exact opposite approach. Number 4 is the Beretta 80X Cheetah in .380. And its answer to recoil is refreshingly stupid in the best way. It's just heavy. The physics here is worth understanding because almost nobody explains it correctly. When people say a heavier gun kicks less, they're being sloppy. The total momentum is identical no matter what the gun weighs. What changes is recoil velocity. A heavy gun has more mass to accelerate, so that same push moves it slower and spreads the impulse over a longer window of time. That's the entire difference between a shove and a slap. Same energy, delivered over more milliseconds, and your hand reads that as gentle. The Cheetah leans into this hard. Aluminum frame, steel slide, 25 ounces empty in a .380. For scale, that's heavier than most people's carry 9mm. Beretta also went further than raw weight and tuned the slide, mass and spring rate specifically to lighten recoil and make the slide easier to rack. You get a 3.9-inch barrel, 13 rounds, 4.9 inches tall, 1.4 wide, and about 6.8 inches overall. The result is a .380 that behaves less like a defensive pistol and more like a range toy in the best sense. You can shoot it all afternoon and your hand doesn't get tired. Here's the catch, and it's a real one. This is still a blowback gun. There's no locked breech in there. The only thing holding the slide shut against chamber pressure is spring tension and slide mass. And that's a crude way to do it. The cheetah gets away with it because it's heavy, not because the action is clever. You're also carrying 25 ounces to fire a round that most people consider the floor for defensive use. And at roughly $800 for the black model, you're paying more than most 9mm pistols cost. If that trade bothers you, the next gun fixed it, and it costs less than half as much. Number 3 is the Ruger Security 380, and this one is the most misunderstood gun on the list. Almost every small point 380 ever built ran on straight blowback, and there's a good reason people hate shooting them. In a blowback gun, nothing mechanically locks the breech. The slide is held forward purely by spring pressure and its own weight, which means the spring has to be stiff. That stiff spring is what makes the slide hard to rack, and it's also why the recoil impulse comes back at you sharp and sudden instead of rolling. It's the worst of both worlds, hard to operate and unpleasant to shoot. Ruger's manual spells out exactly what they did instead, and I'm quoting the manual because you'll actually see the Security 380 described as a blowback gun in print, and that's wrong. Ruger states the pistol uses a locked breech action with a tilting barrel where the barrel and slide, locked together at the moment of firing, travel rearward together, and only then does the barrel cam downward to release the slide. That's a real Browning-style lockup in a budget .380. And here's why it matters. Once the breech locks mechanically, the spring no longer has to do that job. So Ruger dropped the spring rate and built the light rack system around it. Refined serrations, pronounced cocking ears, and a lighter recoil spring. Independent testing measured slide force at under 11 pounds. For someone with hand strength problems, that number is the whole ballgame. It packs a 3.42-inch barrel into a slim 6.5 2-inch frame, weighs just 19.7 ounces unloaded, carries 15 rounds with the extended magazine, or 10 with the flush fit option, and keeps the slide just over an inch wide. All of that comes with a suggested retail price of only $369. The downsides are short, but you need to hear them. Ruger's manual explicitly says, do not use +P ammunition in this pistol. So if you were planning to run hot, .380 loads, that door is closed. With the flush magazine seated, the grip is short enough that most hands get 2.5 fingers on it. And it's a budget gun that feels like a budget gun in the hand. Number 2 is the Beretta 30X Tomcat, and it attacks the problem from two directions at once. The first is the obvious one. It's chambered in .32 ACP, and there's simply less energy in that cartridge to manage. That's not engineering, that's arithmetic. But the second thing Beretta did is the part nobody talks about. And it's the reason this gun outshoots pistols that weigh more than it does. Pressure is force divided by area. The recoil impulse hitting your palm is the force. The width of the grip is the area. Widen the grip and you spread the same force over more square inches of hand, and the sensation drops even though the physics didn't change. The 30X has a grip about an inch and a third wide, wrapped around a cartridge that barely kicks to begin with. That combination is why you can empty it as fast as you can press the trigger and the sights stay where you put them. Then there's the feature that makes this gun genuinely important. Press a button under the slide and the barrel tips up. You drop a round straight into the chamber. If you have arthritis, if you've had a shoulder rebuilt, if you simply cannot generate the grip strength to run a slide, this pistol removes that barrier entirely, and almost nothing else on the market does. Beretta also cut the trigger pull weight by about 35% compared to the old 3032. The standard model runs about 5 inches overall, 4.3 inches tall, 16 ounces with an alloy frame and steel slide, a 2.4-inch barrel, and 8 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. Suggested retail at launch was $599. Now the things a salesman won't tell you. It's still a straight blowback gun, and if you grip it high, that slide will bite the web of your hand. It's grown compared to the old Tomcat, and it's honestly no longer a true pocket pistol. Beretta built the slide to accept optics plates and then took well over a year to actually sell them. And you should know that .32 ACP hollow points can rim lock in the magazine, which is why a lot of experienced .32 carriers stick with full metal jacket. And the biggest one, the one I'm not going to soften. .32 ACP and .380 sit at the bottom end of what most people consider adequate for defense. Softer recoil is not free. You paid for it in terminal performance, and you should make that trade with your eyes open, not by accident. Number 1 is the Walther CCPM2 in .380, and the system inside it is called soft coil. Here's how it works. There's a small port drilled in the barrel just ahead of the chamber. Underneath the barrel sits a cylinder and a piston attached to the front of the slide rides inside it. When you fire, some of the expanding gas gets bled through that port and pressurizes the cylinder. That pressure pushes forward on the piston, and because the piston is bolted to the slide, it's actively holding the slide shut against its own rearward momentum. The gun is literally using the shot to break itself. The slide can't open until pressure drops. And because that gas is doing the holding, the recoil spring gets to be almost nothing, which is why this pistol racks with a fraction of the effort a comparable .380 demands, and why the recoil impulse feels stretched out and soft instead of abrupt. This isn't a Walther invention. It's the same principle Heckler & Koch built the P7 around, a pistol that developed an almost religious following and then disappeared. Walther took that idea, put it in a polymer frame, chambered it in a mild cartridge, and priced it like a normal gun. Almost nobody noticed. The .380 runs a 3.54-inch fixed barrel, 8 rounds, 19.4 ounces empty, 6.41 inches long, 5.12 tall, 1.18 wide, with a suggested retail of $469 and street prices that regularly land well under it. Worth noting, the .380 slide is machined from 7075 aluminum with steel supports, rather than the solid steel used on the 9mm version, because .380 runs at a much lower peak pressure, and that's part of why it's lighter. Now the honesty, because this gun has a history. The original CCP was recalled over a drop safety concern. Walther fixed it and re-released it as the M2. And the current guns have been fine, but you deserve to know that happened. The gas system also means carbon builds up in that cylinder and on the piston, so this is not a pistol you can neglect for 1,000 rounds and ignore. You get 8 rounds, not 15, and it's still a .380, but if what you need is a centerfire defensive pistol that a person with genuinely weak hands can rack, load, and shoot comfortably for an entire range session, nothing on the mainstream market does it better than this, and hardly anyone knows it exists. So here's what I actually want you to take away from all this, because it's more useful than any single gun on the list. The next time you're standing at a counter and somebody hands you a pistol and tells you it's easy to shoot because it's light, understand that they've got it exactly backwards. Light guns kick harder. That's what the physics says. The guns that actually shoot soft are doing something specific about it, dropping the bore into your hand, adding mass to slow the impulse down, locking the breech so the spring can relax, widening the grip to spread the force out, or bleeding gas to break the slide. So ask those questions instead. Where does the barrel sit? Is the breech locked, or is a spring doing all the work? How much does it actually weigh? How much force does it take to rack? Those 4 answers will tell you more about how a gun feels than any spec sheet or any review. None of these 5 have 0 recoil. Nothing does. But every one of them decided that recoil was a problem worth engineering around instead of a fact you're supposed to tolerate, and that's the whole difference. If this was useful, subscribe. We check everything against manufacturer documentation before it goes in a script, and if you catch us getting something wrong, put it in the comments and we'll fix it on camera. That's the deal.